Welcome to Pub in the Desert, where we bring you honest, curious conversations about faith and the human experience. I'm Matthias Miller, here with my co-host Kevin David Krenner. Before we dive in, I want to recap our three guiding principles. Number one, you don't need to be fixed; you need to be known, and we define love as knowing and being known. Second, we approach difficult topics with genuine curiosity. We aren't here to win arguments; we're here to understand. And third, we don't come with preset agendas. We let conversations unfold naturally, and we follow where authenticity leads us. So go ahead, pull up a chair, grab a drink. Let's explore what union looks like with God, with others, and with ourselves. So, Kevin, today I want to kick off our conversation with a comment that someone made during a sermon, and they made the comment about evil not prevailing in the end. And it sent me down this line of thought, and it made me ask the question. First of all, I understand how you come to that from a biblical basis. But from an kind of an experiential, we're here on the earth dealing with evil. Does this actually play out? And I went down just a little bit of a rabbit trail over the weekend around this question. And the question is really, does pure evil self-destruct? And or not? And what does that self-destruction look like? What's the timeline? And what are the dynamics between the interplay of the good guys and the bad guys? And um, maybe I'll just I don't know where you want to start. Maybe just I might just start with some of my observations or musings, and then we'll
Yeah.
where that
Well,
goes.
from the statement you made, the first thought that came into mind is I don't know if you've ever been to the Holocaust Museum in DC. Okay, so it's an experience. I highly suggest it for anybody. But you come down towards the end and you sit in this room and it kind of plays videos or testimonies. And there's a sign on the wall that says the only thing needed for good or for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. So there's that quote, which it brings to mind. And then in the midst of the videos, there's one man talking, and this is a very famous quote. He says, first, first they came for this group and I didn't do anything. And then they came for this group and they came for this group and they came for this group. And then at the end, when they came for me, there was nobody to stand up for me. Those are the two things that pop into my head as you start talking about it. So context for your musings.
I mean, that's and it ties into one of the interesting things that surfaced, which was this experiment where let's see if I can articulate the experiment accurately. But the idea is that you have a group of people who they're playing a game. Anybody can contribute their money into the pool. Anything that's contributed into the pool gets multiplied by a certain factor, but then it gets distributed evenly towards, for everybody. And
Hmm.
so the kind of collaborative individuals will throw in their money. They know what's good for everybody. Everybody gets more because they do it. But then there are people who will withhold their portion because they're going to get money either way. Like they can just keep their own. It doesn't multiply, but nobody else gets it. They'll have more. They'll get ahead. And
Right.
there's kind of this. I mean, as you're saying that, there's genuinely this question: what is doing nothing? Um, like doing nothing may be well, there are these interesting dynamics. Let's actually play out where that goes because in that type of dynamic, that will continue. Essentially, the cheaters, for lack of a better term, the people cheating the system, will gain increasing amounts of control over the system up until the point that there's nobody willing to collaborate anymore. And the tipping point is in some case is a case the person who does something, but you could also argue he does nothing. But the person who refuses to participate in the system, they don't put money in, they don't take money out. And if there's no collaborators to put money into the system, the whole system starts to fall apart.
Right.
And so, and and so there's this sense that for I think many of us, especially in terms of how history frames these events, they're truly dark. But these types of situations do not start with pure evil. It is not. it, it, it can't. It's impossible. And this has been my conclusion. I'm happy to discuss it and maybe wrong, but it's my conclusion that for evil to persist, that the best self-interest of evil in order for it to persist is to actually have some level of altruism in it, or it'll be
Mm.
immediately rejected.
Right. Right. Go further with that. It's
But you
fascinating what you're
can't,
saying, but what would the altruism look like that exists within the evil? The
well, I mean,
alloy there.
sure. I mean, there's any number of ways. One may just be setting boundaries, like a tick on a dog. Had better not suck all the blood. Obviously, there's physical limitations to this, but had better not suck all the blood from the dog, or the dog will die
Mm.
and the tick will die.
Hmm.
It had better not. It may impede the dog in some capacity, but it had better not outright poison the dog because so part of it is if you're a parasite, you have to allow your host to live. That's like
Right.
the minimum bar.
Right.
But in terms of dysfunctional relationships, if you think of kind of parasitic relationships, there's often something that the other, okay, when we let's flip it. When we allow parasitic relationships in our lives, somebody's extracting something from us. There's often something that we're gaining from them
To
by
allow it.
which to allow it.
Hmm.
And I mean, just
Some
literally,
perceived benefit.
and it can be emotional, it can be a sense of significance, a sense of purpose, social status, financial
Right.
reward, any number of things. Um, One of the examples, I mean, another example is in a gang, you can't have, I mean, if you're running a mob, your people are going to want to get paid, and they're going to want to get paid
Right.
equitably. And they might not have a problem with you making a lot more money than they do, but they are going to have a problem if you make undue, unduly large amounts of money at their expense. And they're going to recognize the difference
Right.
and demand more better compensation, or it's a power play. But you have to, in some sense, even in criminal activity, you have to be looking out for the people who are helping you achieve the means to your end,
At least in some way.
at least in some way. Now, it might not. It's not. I'm not going to make the argument that it is purely altruistic in the full 100% capacity. I think that's. I don't think it's possible to.
Well, it's an interesting contrast, right? We're talking about pure evil, but like pure good as well. Does pure good exist here in this world?
Right.
Because if we're talking about pure evil, then we have to talk about the yin to the yang of the pure good. So is everything any pure ever purely altruistic, or is anything ever purely evil?
Well, and even if you want to go into the purely altruistic thing, it's we've had conversations about the difference between being kind versus being nice. And one of the challenges of niceness is that on the surface, you're doing all the good for other people. And yet, what you're not acknowledging is that you have personal needs. And as you deplete those needs, you end up robbing other people of the things that they actually need. Other people actually need you to make sure for you to have your needs met in some capacity. And you
Yeah.
can't just, even selfless giving. I mean, we've seen this many different ways, but there's many people who will pour out their lives for other people, and then something is depleted somewhere, and either it's an abandoned family, it's abandoned relationships, it's turning towards addiction to compensate for that. But much of what
Mm.
we look at as pure good, it's almost like if you truly turn the dial to good and altruism to 100%, you automatically like you automatically leave somebody out of the equation.
Right. Right. Most often that person being you. And there's no
With a
union. There's no union in the it being all about them or all about me. It's a fundamental break with the nature of reality.
Right.
It reminds me of as you were talking, the Jesus tells a story about the shrewd servant who, gets called in to account, and his boss essentially fires him, and then he goes out and he renegotiates the deals with the vendors, as you will. And Jesus praises the shrewdness of that man. And he's like, the people of this world are way more shrewd than you are. And there's something there as well, right? The shrewdness of being a human being.
But I mean, isn't so one of the uncomfortable things about this is this question of, are they not cutting someone else out of the equation? That's the really uncomfortable part of that story.
Right. Of course they are. Like when he goes back and renegotiates the deals, who's losing out? Somebody's losing out.
Yeah.
And Jesus makes this really fascinating statement. He says, I'm sending you out as wolves among sheep. I want you to be as innocent as doves and as wise as serpents. What does that mean?
So, okay, here's another fascinating thing that
Which he
surfaced.
knows was offensive to that culture. The serpent imagery is offensive to that culture. The
To that
dove
culture.
imagery is powerful to that culture. He's contrasting two very powerful images to that culture. To us, doesn't matter too much. We're afraid of snakes and we see doves flying around, and sometimes they're kind of loud.
Right.
But to that culture, he's contrasting two very powerful images.
So one of the interesting patterns that surfaced in my deep dive was that, and I think you see this on a personal level, you see this on an organizational level, that the more that a system gets exploited, the more resilient it becomes to exploitation. And
Hmm.
so it's like, if you have somebody who is highly altruistic, I mean, I think that, okay, let's just talk about the development of an individual who's highly altruistic. Early on, there's almost this naivete in who to trust, trusting everybody, the world is safe, nobody's going to take advantage of me. And then it's almost inevitable that something will happen. I mean, it is, I mean, you're living here on the earth. So somebody's going to find a way to, um, to take advantage of that in some capacity. Um, and then the question becomes your response. Do you learn from it? Do you become cynical from it? Do you, or do you become more discerning to recognize what the patterns are, to take smaller steps towards trust rather than a giant leap into the unknown, or whatever the appropriate response might be. Even with organizations, when you look at organizations who've been working um, with with I don't know, like different populations, like let's say the incarcerated, or the homeless, or things like that. The more, if you have conversations with people who've worked with them a lot, there's a kind of street smarts that they have about, well, this person is genuine and this person is not, and there's a deep sense of compassion for the people who need it, and also for the people who are taking advantage of it, but also clear boundaries against being taken advantage of. And so, is that what Jesus was talking about? Where it's like, don't, well, is that what he was talking about?
I think it has to be an element of it. I don't know if it's the whole thing, but it has to be a piece of it because in interactions with human beings, let's say a specific subset of human beings, let's say drug addicts. Let's say your work takes you into contact with drug addicts consistently. And for a number of years, you've worked in that environment and you've been burned and you've been the burner. And there's been this real education that has happened amongst that subset of people. if you're not discerning and don't learn how to draw boundaries, if you're naive, if you stumble into cynicism and bitterness and resentment, okay, that's one thing. But if you keep your blinders on and you're the innocent on the other side, the goal isn't achieved. The wisdom isn't there. And so if you're the blinders on guy, then there's going to continue you're going to be continually taken advantage of, and the system is going to be taken advantage of. If you're the cynic, then there's no access to help from that side. So like there has to be a middle ground of I have learned through experiences, I have developed this wisdom through very hard situations, but this is how we handle these situations. And even then, it almost comes down to an individual case by case basis where the system may say this person is beyond repair and we need to wash our hands, but there's something in the individual that says, I've seen these things enough, and there's still a hope if this or this or this happens. So even within a system, it comes down to the embodied wisdom of experience that comes from the having to be resilient within the system.
Right.
And so in that sense, to your point, if you're in a system where resilience is required, the outcome seems to be resilience comes. What happens if, because of the pain, you separate yourself from the system? You rob yourself of the wisdom gained from that resilience.
That's fascinating. Well, let me try to say what you said and say it a different way.
Yeah, clear it up
If you're
for me.
if you're I mean, the best business, the best analogy I can think of is in a career sense is you frequently see people. I mean, a friend of mine raised this recently, and it's a great question. I'm not down on him for asking the question. It's kind of like, well, do I want to be doing what I'm doing? What if I wanted to be doing something else? What would that be? And it's a fine question to ask. It's a great reflective question. The issue is that most of us underestimate the skill sets that we've developed based on the course that we've walked. And so I say most of us, some of us, I do, I have. Let me say that. And so if you're just as an example, if you grew up in a household around the trades, centered around the trades, and then build a business around the trades, and at age, 40, you have a midlife crisis and you start deciding to build a tech first software company, that's a giant amount of knowledge that you're abandoning for the sake of something new that you're doing. Um, it's not saying that it's wrong. It might be the right thing to do, but it comes at a cost, and you
So
should
there's
weigh
a
the
price to
cost.
pay.
There's a price to pay. And the opposite is also true. Like I grew up around tech, and so for me to not be around tech in some capacity it is a judgment. It would be a judgment call of is it really worth you know it, it's not a simple easy question, but it's a question of stewardship. Like what do you do with this skill set that you have? Like what makes sense here?
Mhm.
um Similarly, so that's a long-winded way to come back around to what you're saying is if you spend your lifetime with a particular group of people and effectively getting the street smarts to understand how people get taken advantage of, what are the patterns, when is there that spark of transformation, when is it just a facade,
Mm.
and you reach the point where you get completely burned, and you feel like you cannot possibly go back, then it is the same as a career change. You're losing all of the history, all of the knowledge, all of the skills, the experience, the instincts, all of the stuff that you gained from being within that system, and you're effectively setting it aside and not utilizing them again, except possibly in a different context.
Right, right. Yeah. But there seems to be this movement existentially. We would call it the movement of God within. existence. Others may call it other things, but nothing is ever left over. There's nothing that goes unused. So I'm thinking about Joseph, growing up in his family, with his brothers, with his dad, the lessons he learned, they sell him into slavery. He ends up, in Egypt, and he ends up a servant within a house, and there's that experience. And then he has what happens with Potiphar's wife, and he gets thrown into jail, and he has this experience with the other two in jail. And then there's this long road that ends up somehow being fulfilled in becoming the second in charge in Egypt. That same gift that he had of having dreams, which he didn't interpret very well and didn't discern well in the beginning, because he told his brothers that they would end up bowing to him, which is going to piss anybody off. Let's just be honest. The brashness of a teenager going, all you're going to bow to me. Probably not the best thing to say. But then the same gift gets him that position of being second in charge of feud because he's able to interpret a dream. And it's the discernment of how he interprets it. So there's nothing left that's unused. There's this usefulness that happens. So even if you are to change positions, those skills you gained over those years are going to be used just in a different venue. And to me, that's the graciousness of God, of how he designed existence is okay, you switch places. Okay, now you're going to utilize those skills in this thing. Which on the other hand, I'm thinking about, education and the pieces of paper and the diplomas and the alphabet soup after your name and all that kind of stuff. Okay, those are pieces of paper and you have read and you have studied and you're supposed to have had conversations and debates and refining and in the midst of that, but we rarely get that. It's usually a teacher standing up in front of a classroom saying you need to know this, and so you set yourself to know this. But there's that. But then there's also the person who spent 30 years working at the rescue mission and knows the homeless. He knows drug addicts. He knows mental illness. She knows these things because she spent 3 decades earning that wisdom. And there's a discernment to it as well. And so there's many paths to this place, but the reality is who you are and the gifts you have and the wisdom you've earned, that's how you or that's I guess the picture point that I'm saying.
So explain to me the difference. It might sound like you're being argumentative or whatever, playing devil's advocate here, and maybe I am. What's the difference between spending 30 years doing that and closing off that part of your life and moving into a different direction and thereby really losing the gift of everything that you learned from that? And for whatever reason, moving from that context. And in your example, like the example of Joseph, God using these lessons to in our new situation, like on the surface, just looking at it from the surface, it would sound like you're saying completely opposite things.
Yeah. I would say it's the difference between Jonah and Joseph. Both find themselves in equally difficult positions. Jonah's like, hey, go talk to the Ninevites. God says to him, go talk to the Ninevites, tell them this. No, I ain't doing that. Joseph, gets taken away into Egypt. He's not enjoying the experience. It's the idea of embracing the experience that you're in and allowing that to develop discernment and wisdom inside you. As Jonah's running away, he's not developing discernment and wisdom.
Right.
Even after he does what he's been asked to do, he almost does it begrudgingly. And at the end, he's cursing the castor oil tree because it's not providing him what he wants it to provide. It's almost like the reluctant learner versus, hey, we're here. This is what seems to be happening. I'm going to take whatever wisdom I can from it.
And so, to be very clear, then, herein lies the nuance because you might lean into a situation and get the lessons out of it that you need and recognize that there's still something to be developed. There's something to be extracted. There's something to be said about staying in that situation. And you might do the exact same thing, lean into the experience and recognize that no, like legitimately, there's the pragmatic utility of this experience. Like I've extracted it.
Yeah.
And the wisdom of the learning here is to move on.
Right. Yeah, it's possible. And I wonder if this ties back to what we were talking about at the beginning as far as the parasitic nature of evil. What if the parasitic nature of evil is the avoidance of the wisdom and discernment of the experiences of my life? And so I become parasitic off of other people in order to get my needs met
There's almost this sense of,
versus I'm in the situation.
I mean, there's almost this sense of, hey, if I play dumb, I can just play off of other people's intelligence,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then I won't be
Right.
exposed.
Right. Right.
There's another dynamic that I found utterly fascinating, which is there's
Mhm.
kind of this cycle that happens in which you have these people in power, and then you have the lowly ones, the underprivileged, the people being taken advantage of, who say, this is not
Right.
right. We need to fix this. And so they take over the system. And when they take over the system, so just pick, well, I'll give two examples. Pick a country and there's a revolt and this group of people take over the government. And the moment that they take it over, they look at the advantages that they have to gain by being in leadership in the government. And rather than fix the system, like there's this kind of this siren song of like the system has so many benefits. Let me just stay there. I think we see this in governmental turnovers. We see this in any kind of hostile takeover in an organization, whether it's a church, whether it's a business, whether it's no matter what it is. And within a church, it's like, okay, the current leadership is doing everything so wrong. So let's go vote out the bad guy and vote in the new guy. And when the new guy comes in, the same system that was feeding the old guy is still in place. The only difference is it's
Right.
feeding the new guy, not the old guy. So nothing's really been
Well,
fixed.
think
Go
about
ahead.
presidential elections over the last 50 years. You can actually see a natural swing of this is what we're for, this is what we're for. It turns bad. Oh, we got to have a switch to this party. And then we have this party for a short period of time. Then we go back to, oh, no, no, we're going back to that. But the system never changes. Just the face on the system changes.
Well, and this might be getting a little controversial here, but if you want to go even deeper, look at the type of individual that a person is at the end of presidency versus at the beginning of presidency,
Yes.
and put
Yes.
some thought into
Not
that.
controversial at all. Go look online. There's pictures of Abraham Lincoln before his presidency and then days before he died. Or look at Kennedy before he's president and days before he died. Look at these pictures of these people who are president and they spend this time in there and then what they look like afterwards.
But I'm not just talking physically and the stress and the strain. I'm like, and I think this is where it gets controversial, and it's much harder to have kind of an objective measurement. But look at the moral compass.
Oh, yeah. I like that. Yeah, look at the moral compass before and after.
Because there's a lot of people who will go into a system. Man, like this is crazy. I've seen this. I've been there. I think I've been in places and around places where there was this kind of this mission to like, let's reform the system. And I recognized once I got in there that the system was broken. My best interpretation was, I don't want to pretend I did this perfectly. I know that I didn't. And I know that I stayed within the system longer than the me outside of the system would have told me to do that because, like I said, I had things to gain from the system. But there was a line at which point I said that this system is demanding me to compromise. And even it's kind of like this heroic call to reform the system begs you to enter into it. And I have friends of mine who've made similar decisions, but then ended up getting sucked into the system. And I mean, it's really quite sobering when you start to mold yourself into the very system you're seeking to reform.
Isn't that the temptation in the desert? The three temptations. Come into the system. Come into the system. You'll get all that you want. Look at the gifts and talents you have. You will rule the system. Isn't that the siren song of the temptations in the desert?
Continue, continue, like unpack that further.
Yeah.
Like the
The
specific temptations, like turn this rock into bread, step off this building.
yeah. Yeah. Test your security. Um, the most basic need we have, aside from oxygen, is food and water, right? Rely on me for that. Rely on the system for that. Rely on the system to protect you. Throw yourself off this. I will give you all of this that you can see. It's come into the system. Let me take care of you.
Yeah.
And then you see it in his life consistently. They're calling him into the system, they're trying to shame him into the temple system, and he refuses. And then they're trying to shame him into being this revolutionary leader to get rid of Rome. Come into the system, take power, take control. And he doesn't, that's not the kind of power he's interested in. It's very parasitic. And what he doesn't say is when you step into this system, what's going to happen is the system's going to take you. You think you're stepping in to control the system, but the system's going to control you.
Right.
Think about any politician that goes into office. I don't care how idealistic they are, the system's going to control you. Look at Jimmy Carter, by all measures, a good man, a good man. And yet he gets into the system and the politics are played and the negotiations happen and all that kind of stuff goes on. That's what happens. That's what happens. So I had this thought, like as we've been talking, it like at its very nature, evil is not creative because it takes all of that creative energy and directs it towards fear, protecting myself against what I'm afraid of. So it's not creative by nature. To go back to what we talked about maybe like a month ago, I think it just got published recently. And then it can only be parasitic. It's the only thing it can be because all my energy is directed towards manipulating and strategizing and creating the world I want to live in, that I need to live in. And then you got John in First John 4 saying there is no fear in love. Perfect love drives out all fear because fear is based on punishment. To me, that almost directly leads to fear has or evil has to be parasitic. If I have to get mine, and I'm afraid I'm not going to, the only option I have if I'm under fear is I have to take from you.
Right.
It's the only option. Now we know that there is another option that we together can support each other. But if I'm afraid, that's not an option. I have to take from you. It's the only option.
One of the things I came across was, or this whole idea that extraction blocks innovation
Right.
because it's
It
by
has
very
to.
nature fear driven, it's self-protective.
Mhm.
And I mean, the system itself is threatened by innovation. I think, I mean, these things go in cycles. Like things break down and get rebuilt. I think when you look at the church, some of the church growth types of things that were happening in the 90s and 2000s and such, we saw a lot of fear around the innovation because it was threatening the existing systems. Now, a lot of those innovations now have their own protective mechanisms around them, unfortunately.
Right. You have
Looking
right
at
now, currently, we have the emergent church. We've got the deconstructed movement. We've got the reformed movements. We've got the Orthodox movements. We've got all these movements within church, each one threatened by the other. There's no creativity there.
right,
There's just parasitic relationships.
well, and to the point of extraction, um, one of the I came across this again, not verified, heard this secondhand, makes sense, but not verified. Um, but a proven church growth tactic is build a new church building, and
Yep.
which typically is a form of extraction. It's create the shiny new thing that pulls people from other congregations that they come join you, and like what becomes new in that. And you can make all the arguments whether or not church should be something that's innovative or not, or what innovation should look like in church might be a better question. Um,
Hmm. A fascinating question. Yeah. Well, you think about take it out of that realm, take it into sports teams.
sure.
So your short sports team isn't doing so great. So you sign this new free agent. There's all sorts of newness about it. There's all sorts of hope that comes about it. Okay, you get new ownership. You start to spend more money. Now people are flocking to that place to watch. Okay, innovation. But you haven't innovated anything. You just spent more money. What are you innovating?
Well, which goes down to this kind of innovation fundamentally. I mean, there is kind of this alchemy sense to innovation. It's the mathematical side of me always thinks about this in terms of the underutilization of resources in moving resources from a lower value to a higher value.
Hmm.
Which fundamentally is with the AI. I was talking to a friend of mine this past week and talking about AI, and he's talking about all these files he has to recategorize and how he uses AI to go through them. And I just made this very snarky, sarcastic comment about AI taking his job away. And to which he was like, yeah, exactly. Like the part of my job I don't want to have. Um, like their innovation fundamentally is a creative process by which some shift in perspective creates some form of opportunity or open door that didn't exist previously. And the problem with most the problem with how competition is most commonly framed is that competition commonly is framed from the perspective of extraction. How do I take customers away from the people down, whatever? How do I win championships? How do I take championships away from other teams?
How do I
And
increase market share, essentially?
how do I increase market share? And
Yeah.
but it's increasing market share by squeezing out other people.
Yep.
It's not how do I increase market share by creating genuine value adds
Hmm.
that that grow grow the total addressable market or whatever you want to grow the market size. Those are very different conversations.
Very different.
And I think if you look at corporations that have, well, man, the challenge with corporations and civilizations is that they need bureaucracy. Most of them need bureaucracy to persist. Like you can't have this. You can't have stability without some level of bureaucracy. But then the bureaucracy creates kind of this insular layer around innovation, and it's very rare for a large company like that to kind of to maintain an innovative culture and not turn self-protective in some capacity.
The larger I get, the more I have to lose, and the more protective of it I get.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a very life timeline type of thing, right? I'm young, I'm in college, I ain't got much to lose. But I get into my 30s and 40s and have a house and I got a family. I got a business, maybe. I got whatever it is. And I don't want to lose this. I don't want any of it to be taken away. So it subtly shifts from moving forward, working, innovating, developing to uh, gatekeeping. I gatekeep. I watch those walls like a hawk to see what danger is coming.
So what's the difference between, again, pushing for nuance? Because there's some of that that's just you're young, you're naive, like you have no idea of the
Yeah, of
risk.
course.
And some of that risk keeping is like, all right, this stuff actually matters. Like I'm not just going to, I mean, it's kind of like the shepherd at the gate of the sheep. Like I'm not just going to let a wolf run in.
Of course.
So what's the difference between the mature gatekeeping and the paranoid self-protective gatekeeping? Because those aren't the same. There's also legitimate reasons why as you get older, you become much more intentional about the types of decisions that you make, and you do tend to de-risk for any number of reasons. And I would argue that they're not necessarily, it's not inherently wrong or bad to de-risk.
No, 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 I wouldn't say so either. Maybe it comes down to freedom, free will. Maybe it comes down to Luke 15. The son wants to leave. Father doesn't stand in his way. Says you're free to leave. But he also says you're free to come back. And we see that in his response to his son when he returns. The older son doesn't believe he's free to leave. Father's a slave driver. Father's not a slave driver. You're afraid that if you leave, you'll lose all of this. The younger son's not. He just goes. Maybe it's about free will. Maybe that shepherd standing at the gate, and I'm saying this hypothetically for conversation. Maybe if the shepherd standing at the gate sees a sheep that wants to leave, the free will of that sheep has to rule. Hey, you get to leave.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying it's as cut and dry in that because there's subtlety and nuance to everything. But big picture, what do we value more? Free will, freedom, or control?
Isn't okay, jumping back into our conversation, isn't the fundamental issue of the older brother that he was not willing and able to learn from his experience to make the best decision that he knew how to?
Right.
It was like learning from his experience was excluded for whatever reason. It wasn't the right thing to do. I have
He
to
was
stay.
afraid of something because I'm afraid of something makes that statement. I have to stay. What's he afraid of? Now, we're talking about a parable that Jesus tells. So, there's probably a billion and one layers that we're all missing to this parable, despite very intelligent people over thousands of years dissecting it. I guarantee you there's still things we're missing. But maybe another layer to it is what is the older brother afraid of?
So, what's your answer? What do you think?
Yep. Well, there's something that strikes me. The younger son essentially tells his father that he wishes he was dead. That's what asking for your inheritance early means in that culture. The father gives it to him. He goes away, lives it up, does his thing. And then the fascinating thing to me is at a certain moment, maybe his rock bottom, he goes, I can go back to my father. So he does. He knows something that the older brother doesn't. He knows his father will welcome him back. Maybe the older brother doesn't know that. So he's afraid to leave.
It seems like the younger brother, just borrowing from attachment theory again. The younger brother realizes that no matter what the external consequences of his decisions are, that he has a home base to go back to.
Right. Right.
And the younger brother or the older brother um, seems to have this idea that if I leave home base, there is no return back.
Yeah. Right. That seems to be the case, right? Seems to be the case. Because the actions prove it. The younger son leaves and then comes back.
Right.
If he wasn't assured that there would at least be some place for him. Now, in his mind, he's thinking, my dad has a ton of servants. Like, I could just be a servant. He's not assured of his position, but he knows he
Right.
can go back.
Right.
He
I
seems
mean,
to have that certainty where the older
it,
brother doesn't.
isn't this also kind of reminiscent of the thieves on the cross? Like this one says like, I mean, kind of like the one guy, the one thief is assured that is very assured in his position. The other one is like kind of man. I terrible pulling up the specifics in my head, but like there's this sense of like, listen, even if I would be at the bottom rung of paradise, like, can you just think of me when you get there?
Yeah, he doesn't ask to be with him. He
He just has
asks
to be remembered.
to remember me. That's all he asks. Remember me. He knows what his life has been like. He knows what he's done. We don't know the full story of why those men were being crucified. I mean, they're given labels, and so they had to have run afoul of the rules of society in one way or another, and in a pretty extreme way. And so they're crucified, which was a shaming exercise. They had done something worth shaming. And he's fully aware of that. And yet, in that moment, he says, you didn't do anything to deserve this. I know that. I have. The implied message is, I have. Remember me.
There's this also this fascinating thing where it's, I mean, Jesus clearly seemed to use this parable to point fingers at the only knowledge of righteousness. Like the older brother was only knowledgeable about his righteousness, all the things he had done right, even if it was self-righteousness, even if it was delusional. There was only an awareness of that. And the younger brother had this keen awareness of his unrighteousness, of his brokenness, of the thief had an awareness of, I deserve this. What I
Yeah.
did was wrong. The shaming is like, I accept the shaming. The younger
Blessed
brother,
are those who are poor in spirit.
so is there, I mean, it seems like this prayer of acknowledging sinfulness and brokenness lies somewhere in the heart of this topic that we're circling around. The Jesus prayer.
Right. The awareness of my capacity for evil, selfishness, manipulation, strategizing, coercion, taking. There's an awareness of my capacity for that. Son of David, have mercy on me, a sinner.
And so coming
David
back,
falling at his knees before Nathan. Oh man, it has just been made really clear to me how much I messed up and the acknowledgement of it.
you see that throughout the Psalms. You see this contrasted between David and Saul. Saul, just we've talked about this. We don't need to dive back in. We talked about this previously about him making the sacrifice and blaming Samuel for being late. It's not, it was never, I'm not the problem. Samuel, if you had better time management, this wouldn't have happened. And so maybe jumping back to this conversation around around evil and parasitic relationships, maybe a significant part of this simply comes down to either the inability or the unwillingness to acknowledge our ability to sin and to do harm to others. And is it perhaps wisdom to, I don't want to distort this into something that it's not, but isn't there something that should at some level be terrorizing to us about our
Yes.
capacity for evil and harm?
Should be. Yes. Yeah. There's a book. I'm trying to look at it that I read recently. It was powerful. Theo of Golden by a guy named Alan Levy. This old man he's in his 80s, mid 80s, moves to a town in Georgia called Golden. And he's just this, everybody loves him. They're kind of suspect of him because he's such a good man. And as the book plays out, you see why he was a good man, because he has been humbled and he's come face to face with his choices and it's changed him. It's a fabulous book, but it's that what you're talking about is I acknowledge my capacity for being a parasite, my capacity for evil, and I've gotten a taste of it, and it's real and it's painful not only to myself but to others, and I can't be there anymore. That's the wisdom, I think, that should come from making those parasitic choices. Maybe that's what the younger brother felt. He's out there, he's doing his thing, he's living it up, he's all that kind of stuff. He's being a parasite.
Yeah.
And then the parasite ends as it always ends. Once that what you're feasting off of, you can't feast off of any longer. You're left with nothing. And so you return.
Yeah. Well, if I can extend on that, there's also something very sobering and very, again, is this the right term? I'm not sure, disciplined about not
Mm,
running from the reality and accepting the reality that this isn't something that's going away. That
yeah,
just because I think, again, the lure is to believe that once I achieve X, fill in the blank, I've done something. I've accepted Christ. I've been baptized. I'm reading scripture daily. I'm achieving some level of humanitarian benefit. I fill in the somewhere that
yeah. What is
I
it?
will have, when I've come to peace sufficiently with the world, then I will have lost my capacity for evil, my capacity for harm.
Right,
And there's something
right.
deeply disturbing, deeply grounding, and deeply, maybe even healing about remaining present with that awareness and recognizing that there is no running from that.
And yet evil doesn't learn that lesson. Pure evil, pure parasitic evil doesn't learn that lesson. I think it uses shame and anger as avoidance and never comes face to face with what it is that I am capable of.
Well, and maybe there is something about the responses we can have when we come face to face with it. There's any number of responses. It's easy to run, it's easy to hide, and even if you come to the place of facing it, m- many of us spend quite a bit of time hiding from it before we're willing to do that.
Of
Um,
course, of course.
and so you can distance yourself, you can turn it into a chess game,
Right,
all of these things.
right. How much time, money, emotion, whatever resource you have has been spent on avoiding taking responsibility for what is mine to take responsibility for. The whole system runs on it.
Well, the whole
We
system's
talked
set up
about,
not taking
yeah,
responsibility. Go ahead.
right. When we talked about a few weeks ago, we talked about the three C's, curiosity, community, and connection. And how I
Yeah.
had heard this philosopher talk about those three things. You get those three things taken care of, then 99% of human mental health issues go away. What if that's really the case? What if that's really the case? And the opposite of curiosity, community, and connection are judgment, separation, and isolation. No medicine, no therapy, no spiritual direction. Nothing is going to touch your experience in that until you come into contact with this is what my actions, my thoughts, my whatever have brought about. Nothing.
Hmm. This is a little bit of a change of change of topic and or like within the same topic, but a little bit of a change of focus. That one of the interesting things we see this in David's life. David often asks the question of how long will evil prevail? And in David's life, we saw a lot of evil that was overturned, a lot of wrong things made right. One of the things he did not see was the temple being built. He did not see the Messiah's coming. Many of these things. I think one of the things, as we look at the context of um, whether we look in our personal lives within their own context of these self-protective measures, the denials of reality, but also as we look at the world at large, the timeline that these things persist often exceeds our instinctive timeline. We it persists longer than we think it should. And
Oh, yeah.
I think the challenge that I see with much of the narrative today about the state of the world is that we forget that historically things have not been dark for days, weeks, months, or years. They've been dark for centuries and sometimes for millennia. Um, and this, if you're not careful with this, it's very easy to paint this idea that evil is self-destructive as some kind of there is salvation for your situation right around the corner. And there might be some good for the better. But historically, and also, let's be clear, even within the Holocaust, as horrifying as it is, there were individuals who found moments of grace within the hell of all that the Holocaust was. It doesn't, I'm not
Right.
trying to minimize all of the evil
No,
that it was, but
no,
it's
there
it's
isn't a way to minimize it.
but
They look at Viktor Frankl or Elie Wiesel, like these people who have written books about their experience in those times. Like there is. There's grass that grows between the cracks of the cement in New York City. Life insists on moving forward. And as you're talking, what I'm thinking of is like evil by its very nature is never satisfied. It always has to consume more and more and more. And so naturally, what it's feeding on will come to an end.
right,
And so it has to self-destruct.
yeah,
It has to. And to me, that looks like on big picture what what the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation and Jesus' own words talk about what this end looks like when evil has come to the end of its consumption. It will force a final pitched battle and it will lose. So
yes,
in that end, yes, good does win. In that end, good does win. But that is a massive, big picture view.
yes, and yes, 100 times yes. And the shorter term view is that evil persists often far, far, far longer than our human minds would like to think. And I think it goes back, and this is my opinion again, but until evil is fully conquered, whatever that looks like, abolished, whatever, dealt with, not looking for precise terminology there, but it is for its own self survival. It carries within it a form of a distorted form of altruism that allows it to continue to
It
persist.
has to.
And for that very reason, it takes an incredible amount of force to topple even the most evil system.
Right. It takes a force that, despite all the pressures, every movement of every force coming against something stands still. That's the reality of it.
So here's kind of the question, because this is like a very this could become a very heady kind of intellectual theoretical conversation.
Yeah.
So for the sake of day-to-day living, like how do you I don't know, how should this really change how you and I live? How should it inform our days tomorrow and next week and the week thereafter?
Yeah. I don't know how to answer that question other than in this way. I spent years and years and years. particularly in the Gospel of John. It's always been fascinating to me. Something about it has always drawn me in, sucked me in, and I'll get lost there for massive expanses of time. And over my years of reading it, sitting with it, praying over it, the conclusion I've come to, and this is my conclusion now, it may change. But what I hear John saying, one who walked with Jesus, saw him intimately, maybe knew him best. The advice I hear from John is do the next thing in love. Do the next thing in love. Do your best to do the next thing in love. That's what I try to do. And I fail horribly at it many times, but I keep trying. And that's the only advice I could give somebody. Let knowing and being known and curiosity be your guide. Walt Whitman, somewhere. I don't know if it's in one of his poems or one of his letters. I think he contrasts curiosity and judgment. And he says, be curious, not judgmental. And I think he's on to something about what it means to do the next thing in love, to be curious. There's this scene in the show Ted Lasso where he's in this pub and he gets challenged to a dart match with this guy, and it's high stakes. And they're playing, and it comes down to where Ted, the character, main character, has to get this high number on his last three darts. And he starts talking and he says, he references that Whitman quote, and he goes, if you were curious, you would have asked me if I had ever played darts before. And I would have told you from the age 10 to 16, I sat in a bar with my dad every Sunday afternoon while he watched sports. And I played darts all those times, but you didn't. And then the punctuate on the last one, it goes right in the bullseye. What he needed. Such a great scene. It's like one of those moments where it's like, if you would have just asked, you would have saved yourself a lot of pain, but you judged instead.
Mm.
And I wonder if that is what God is saying to us. If you would have been curious and asked and sought to know and be known, how much pain would you have experienced?
And maybe that is much of the maturing process. Maybe that is much of the discernment is twofold. First, developing the ability to ask questions, becoming better at them, and and then true discernment is knowing what questions to ask. That's really the revelation. I think often the revelation of expertise is that.
Starting with the goal of asking questions, and then over time, discerning which questions actually matter.
Yeah.
We seem to get wrapped up in the how and the what and the when and the where. But at least to me, the most powerful questions are centered around the why. Who are you? What have you experienced? All towards why.
Okay, so if so okay, so let's dive into this a little bit. The why question.
Mhm.
What questions tend to be very difficult to answer?
Why? The why questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is
And it
fascinating on a very human level, right? Somebody
explain.
says, Matthias, why did you do this?
I mean, the easy answer is because uh, I experienced this is a very reductionistic perspective, but I I received either a small or large number of inputs that led me to
Right,
believe that this is the direction. And most of those inputs, by the way, I'm completely unaware of. So how would you like me to answer that?
right.
Right?
Yeah.
And
And
so,
isn't it fascinating that most of us, I think most would answer the same way. I had a very distinct, small number, maybe large number of powerful inputs, but I don't see too many people saying, but what I thought about those inputs was this, and the tension between the input and what I thought about it.
okay, I had an insightful experience this past week. I've been working on building vibe coding tools for in enterprise database platform that's not mainstream, but um, and in the course of conversation, it kept making certain types of mistakes, and I'm like, this is very curious. Like, why is it? And somewhere along the line, I had this realization that there's this AI is assuming a certain perspective on absent information, for lack of a better term, just to keep it super simple. Um, and there's technically a difference between um, um, just as an example, no text existing and text existing but having zero length. Okay, it's a very technical distinction, but it matters.
Yeah,
But the point of that isn't the technical thing. The point of it was this aha that I had never noticed is in this language that there are some situations in which like this definition of absent values is not as clearly defined as and so here's my point. Sorry, trying to get out of the technical. My point was I had this epiphany where I'm like, no, there's a fundamental misunderstanding. It's applying the wrong mental model to the way this works. And if I fix its mental model, it's like I can't figure out. It's like all these surface things. Like, oh, it does this wrong, and this is redundant, and why did it do that? And yeah, instinctively started picking up on some of these cues. But then when I recognize the mental model, it's like, no, hang on. Your mental model is broken. Here's what these things
yes,
actually mean, and this is what it is. And just like that, like boom, quit making those mistakes. And
right.
I think one of the challenges I faced in terms of transformation, I think back to a particular moment when I was first exposed to attachment theory. And one of the most insightful comments that the trainer made at that point was that, and I forget the exact numbers, you might know better than I do, but it's something like there's this something like a 67% correlation between your attachment style and your grandparents' attachment style.
Right. Yeah.
And and so it's really difficult to gauge. It's really difficult or it was difficult for me. I don't know what it's like for other people, for me to gauge my attachment style with my parents, but it was very easy for me to gauge my parents' attachment style with my grandparents. It's like staring me in the face. I was like,
Yes.
oh, that's a really useful back of the napkin thing. And what I realized was that but you can't. The problem with mental models is that you can't until you compare and contrast. Like It remains hidden until somebody else can compare and contrast a mental model against yours, and somebody expresses and articulates a way to think about something differently than you do. And it's only at that point that you have the ability, you have some kind of objective measurement around which to measure your mental model. Up until then, it's
Right.
like, oh, we behave differently. Nobody knows why. There's no,
Right. Yeah.
um,
What you're talking about is what's called a map of meaning. And so great psychologists, philosophers, everything, they understand the map of meaning for each person. If the person's freely sharing this is how meaning was created in my life. And then you can start to contrast it, right? And start to contrast it to, okay, this is your map of meaning. And then here's another map of meaning. What do you see as the difference between these two? And that's those inputs. The inputs you're talking about create the map of meaning. This is how I got from A to B, was those inputs.
okay,
But
so
what's
explain to me that.
often missing is my interaction with the inputs and my critical thought about what do I feel about that input. It's not plugging the jack into the speaker and immediately meaning flows. It's supposed to be, oh, what does that look like to me? What do I feel about that? Is that okay? And do I have a group around me who I can bounce those things off of and say, hey, what about this? That's what creates the map of meaning. And that's what messes up our map of meaning is that we simply just take it like a jack into a speaker. Okay, now I'm connected. That's the problem.
So explain to me the skill set of asking questions around that. Like, is that fundamentally around? I mean, certainly there's curiosity. There's curiosity about events. There's curiosity about what the meaning was that people assigned to those events. But there's also got to be a skill set of some kind, which is having some palette or vocabulary around maps of meaning. Is that
Right.
fair?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there has to be. And
So,
there has to be a level of curiosity which allows a question, a heartfelt, honest question to be asked, and a um, heartfelt openness to walk that path with somebody. There has to be.
so explain to me. So for somebody, let's say somebody who's completely a novice. The easy question to ask is, well, why did you do that? And well,
Right.
obviously that's not helpful. So then the next easy question is, well, walk me through the series of events leading up to your decision to do X, Y, or Z. Slightly more
Yeah.
helpful, perhaps. Um,
Hmm.
but what's first of all, are those appropriate ways to kind of describe levels of question asking, for lack of a better term? And if so, if not, what would you add to that, or what are there other types of questions? And if so, what does the next level of question asking actually look like?
So what I would do is I would try to understand the map of meaning that that individual has. So I would say, okay, you had this situation that occurred. What was your feeling in the midst of it? Did you feel scared? Did you feel sad? Did you feel angry? Okay. Now, have you felt that way in any other situation in your life? Because then I start tapping into inputs. Where was this viewpoint input from? And so as you start tapping into that, then the story starts to unfold. Most people have a script that runs through their head constantly that they're completely unaware of. And so if you ask them to sit still with a certain event and you say, just sit with it. Where do you feel it in your body? What was its experience like for you? when they slow down, they can actually start feeling it. Okay, now we got to a feeling. That's your experience of the circumstance. Okay, now have you had that feeling before? Sit with that question. It's a very slow process of being able to sit with your experience. I'm taking you back from instead of having the speaker cable jacked into the speaker. Now I'm saying, okay, what was your experience of that? Slow down.
So there's a sense in which you're looking at a particular, this is a very apologies if this is too clinical or technical or logical or rational, but there's a sense in which you're looking at the events as the inputs. You're looking at the felt emotion, the experience as the outputs. And
Hmm.
once you've established that for a single instance, then you're looking at what are other instances of this same output
Is this
for
a
those
pattern?
yeah, for those instances, what were the inputs? And then what, I mean, and then it becomes just solving a puzzle. What black box of meaning would result in these inputs consistently producing these outputs?
Exactly. Exactly. And it's funny that you would categorize that as uh, uh, how did you what did you say? Preface it before
Rational,
you asked.
logical, clinical, I
Rational,
don't know.
logical. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Because it's heavily relational. In that space, it's heavily relational. I'm here with you. I'm asking these questions. I want to know about you. I'm interested. So I'm relating to you and I'm walking with you through this process. It's heavily relational.
But it's simultaneously highly systematic.
Right. Because our relationships have to be. They have to be systematic.
See, I've had so many people. Okay, so explain this one for me. You must, or else. The
You're in trouble.
You're in trouble. I mean, people tend to take relational people. Okay, sorry.
Mhm,
This is painting people in whatever weird lights. But take a group of people who don't understand this other
mhm.
group of people, and typically what these people over here will say is, "Well, I'm very logical, very results oriented," and these other people are
Mhm.
illogical and very like just sporadic
Right.
and incongruent and
Yeah.
dramatic and all of those things.
All they're saying in that moment is without saying it, is their map of meaning is different than mine.
And
That's
I'm
all
not
they're
willing
saying.
to explore, and I'm not willing to explore their map of meaning. Just
Exactly.
throw them under the bus a little bit. Come on, Kevin.
Sorry, sorry.
Right.
Uh,
Uh,
I'm probably protecting that group because I have found myself in that group more often than not. You're just being irrational and illogical and like as a five on the Enneagram. Yeah. No, the reality is their map of meaning was different than mine, and I didn't want to walk the path and look at what their map of meaning looked like. Bottom line.
yes, I understand. I've been there myself. And the longer I live with myself, the more aware I am of how often I am in that space, which is really tragic. Um, the but also good. Um, and I think the challenge is that I mean the really paralyzing thing is just like, okay, let's take strong emotion out of it. Let's just say you're in a work situation. Um, by the way, this is like, well, anyway, this has been a useful tool set to develop in parenting, which I'm using incredibly imperfectly, but the whole, more diplomatic than this, but the whole what in the world were you thinking and allowing the explanation of how we got to A to Z, like, yes, of course I should take a baseball bat and I don't know what,
Yeah,
do
because
some
clearly
wavy
there was a
thing.
logical thought process
I mean,
involved.
There may be gaps in the logic, but it's shocking how often there actually is logic involved. Um,
Hmm.
but okay, like if there's a place where there's strong emotion, it seems like now we have a grid for engaging with that. There is a strong emotion. What do we
Yes.
feel? Do you feel something in your body? All of that. Like, but what about places when people are just doing really weird stuff? Like, and just to take a lot of judgment out of it, like let's just say it's a restaurant and you've got a waiter or a waitress who for whatever reason is consistently like I don't know, writing things in a really confusing way on the tickets as they go back to the kitchen. Like
Hmm.
how do you there you don't have a strong emotion to hang your hat on to dissect. Like how do you understand the map of meaning that's leading to that? Or there obviously it can be go
But
beyond the book. Go ahead.
yeah, I actually do think you have a strong emotion there because every time that waiter writes the weird message on the ticket and takes it back to the kitchen, what happens in the kitchen?
I mean,
How's the
chaos
kitchen going to
ensues.
respond? Right. And who's
Right.
going to feel the outlet of that chaos?
The person who wrote the note, who wrote the ticket,
The waiter.
the
So
waiter.
there's going to be a shame that starts to develop. That's a great, strong emotion to start with. What do you feel when the cook gets angry with you after you've written this ticket? Oh, wow. Well, I feel like I'm not enough, or I feel embarrassed, or I feel scared, or I whatever. Okay, now we've got something we can deal with. The weirder situations are actually much easier to deal with because it's all out there in the open. The
Yeah.
harder ones are the ones where you're having to negotiate a life lived by a map of meaning, convinced that that map of meaning is absolutely reliable. Those are the harder ones. When these pop up, you're like, oh, okay, this is aberrant.
Okay,
We can get to that quicker.
okay, but to that point, like fundamentally, you do understand that there has to be clear communication between. I mean,
Has to be.
restaurants generally are optimized for getting the right food to the right people at the right time, right? Like,
That's kind of how they make their money, right?
kinda.
Yeah. Do I value the system or the person?
So then the question becomes, is there something in the individual's experience? And I've started paying much closer attention to this over the last month. What are the situations where I forget things or do things incorrectly? And it's been a very fascinating exploration.
Right. Yeah.
And so,
I
most
have
likely,
a I have a photographic memory for certain things. I don't forget conversations, typically. Songs that I've heard once, I can sing the whole song for you. Movies, I can relay this point for you. Like it just happens. I did not develop this ability. It just happens. But I cannot seem to remember to take the trash cans out to the street on Tuesday mornings before I leave for work. I can't. The amount of times that I've driven away and had to drive back and pull the trash cans out because I forgot to take them out. I walk right by them on my way out of the house to my car.
so my threat to you is I'm going to record an audio of me singing a song about taking the trash out Tuesday morning, and I'm going to make you listen to it on auto repeat while you're running. And
Exactly.
and so not only will you have that song going through your head, you also have the version of me singing it going through your head, which makes it
So you're gonna shame me into better
yeah.
behavior.
I mean, if it works, it works. No, just kidding.
Which is how our world works.
No, but
But
like,
the reality
I
of it is, for me, what I've really treated this as an experiment and thought about it and talked to other people about it. I am so focused on getting to work and what I have to do that morning because there's such a short period of time that any time the trash can slip and it's just Tuesday morning.
Right.
If it was Thursday morning, no big deal. If it was Wednesday morning, no big deal. Just happens to be Tuesday morning, which is more pressurized. And I'm starting to see that because my mind is there, even when I pass by the trash cans, my mind is over there already.
Which comes down to this time pressure fundamentally.
Exactly. Yeah.
And which is similarly the pattern I've been saying. Like anytime there's an imposed time pressure, the likelihood of me forgetting things or making mistakes goes up substantially
Yeah,
and
exponentially.
exponentially. And it raises the question then too of are detail oriented people, like is that an inherent trait, or is that something that was cultivated by hyper value of urgency? And there's all the nuance of that, but it's a very curious question in my mind.
Yeah, because my friends are make fun of me for this. They'll ask me a page number of a book, of a line that's in a book, and I can tell them.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know how I can do it. I just can't.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. But then taking the trash cans out, no.
Nope. Nope.
Remembering to feed my dog in the morning before I leave. Again, Tuesday mornings.
That's where environmental reminders like lock your dog in your car or something becomes the answer.
I'm just sitting there in the front seat waiting for me.
He's like, "Hi, yeah, I gotta feed you." Okay, I'm really full of bad advice right now. Um, so I mean, in that setting, then there is this question of, are we trying to fix an individual? Can we create some kind of environment where things work despite the situation? Can we create adaptations? Can there be can there be a stopgap so that before the cook is ready to fire up this particular dish, that there's some kind of, oh, by the way, did you mean this or that? Like, where those things can be
Exactly.
clarified, etc. Which comes
Can
down
we
to kind
know
of,
each other?
do we know each other? So then, once we have inputs and outputs, how valuable is it to have a sort of vocabulary and or a palette, if you will, any however you want to describe it, of maps of meaning?
Absolutely essential. Absolutely essential. And the only palette vocabulary that I know that works consistently and works really well is the vocabulary of love and belonging. It's the only vocabulary that allows human beings to flourish.
So fundamentally, many of your questions end up drifting into some variation of the question of what what are or were the rules of love and belonging in these
Yes,
contexts. And this is when it's granted, and this is when it's not granted.
exactly.
And we touched
This is
on
when
this
I was
briefly,
known, and this is when I wasn't.
right?
Yeah,
And this is when I was safe, and this is when I had to self-protect.
yes,
And we just touched on this briefly, which we didn't have a chance. That you know this will be long out, once this goes live. But um, the getting to the place, wholeness and growing in wholeness fundamentally is about coming to this place of being able to live with unearned belonging,
yep,
persistent unearned belonging.
yeah. Sometimes intentional unearned belonging.
That's fair. That's fair.
It's the teenager who comes in to my class who hates the world and hates life and hates being there and all that kind of stuff. Just the the spirit exuding off of them is just misery and resentment and bitterness, and they're greeted with love, with knowing and being known, with you're welcome here, with acceptance, no matter what they do. That's that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You're welcome here.
And if there's any kind of superpower for navigating the world, if there is one, and for avoiding many of the pitfalls, much of the self-sabotaging behaviors that we experience in any number of ways, shapes, and forms comes down to that of trying to earn our belonging.
Yep, always. It's not very complicated at the end of the day. Trying to earn our belonging.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, to circle back around, evil, enemies, parasites, and now belonging. I'm curious. I'm curious what thread you would, well, photographic memory. That's a very interesting thread to pull because I think all of us in some capacity end up being fascinated by other people's extraordinary, unexplainable abilities, whether it's in whatever capacity. Oh,
Right.
musicians who can with with you know perfect pitch. That's seemingly all of that. I'm curious what thread you would pull throughout this from this conversation.
It was funny as you were kind of recapping where we went. My mind immediately went to evil, bad people, parasites, all stemmed from a lack of belonging.
Yeah,
And I don't think that's an oversimplification. I think if you dig far enough, you'll find a lack of belonging.
and that would
And I
be
think the fascinating thing is the person who has shown themselves to be a kind, gentle, loving person. That also stems from a lack of belonging.
that's that's a whole conversation. Every once in a while, it'd be fantastic if we could just hit stop on the recording and restart and dive straight into it.
Right. Right. Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
All right. Well, to be continued.
Yeah.
Um, I think this to me has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, and it's fascinating to have it land back on the conversation of belonging, which has been a point of and I've also been reflecting, at least in small parts, on this past week. Not deeply, but it's striking, and I would be very curious, very interested in picking up that conversation further
Yeah,
in the
me too.
future. So,
Me too.
all right, for all of those of you listening in, Thanks for joining us on this journey, being part of this conversation, being part of this, being just being part of this, and invite you to subscribe, share with your friends, people who you know who would enjoy listening in on this conversation as well. And thank you. Until next time.
Till next time.